Welcome back. I'm Majid, and this is Financial Crime Awareness Hub. Today, the most important topic, and as promised in our last video, what we're going to cover today is the human trafficking and financial crime. And I want to say something before we start. This is not just a compliance topic. Behind every financial indicator in this video, this is a real person in a genuinely terrible situation, I would say. We approach this with the seriousness it deserves. So for all of us, those who are compliance professionals, human trafficking is one of the most important topics in domain A. Not because it appears frequently in the exam, but because the financial system is one of the most powerful tool, I would say, available to detect it also. So, and that means you have a role into it. Let's dive into it now. Alright, so let's discuss one scenario here. A nail salon in a mid-sized city processes unusually high cash revenues every week. The workers live on the premises and are rarely seen outside. Their wages are never deposited into personal bank accounts. The owner makes frequent cash deposits just below the reporting thresholds. Payments from the business go to multiple shell company accounts in different cities. Just go through this and let's discuss how this is impacting what is happening here. First thing, what crime is most likely happening here and what is the money actually coming from? Okay. Which compliance red flags are present and how many you can identify? What are the AML obligations when these indicators are identified? Let those three questions, you need to think now, what are the things that can potentially happen? Okay, so these are, I would say, 5 total red flags in that scenario, such as high cash revenues with no legitimate explanation, workers living on premises with no freedom, wages not paid into personal accounts, and then structuring is happening because it mentioned deposits deliberately kept below thresholds. Shell company is being used for the payments with no clear commercial purpose. This is a human trafficking operations in a way, using a cash intensive business as a front. Front means it's not an actual business. Behind there is some crime that is happening. And the financial system processed every one of those transactions. This is why human trafficking is in domain A of the CAMS exam. The compliance professionals is often the only one person in a position to see these signals, because you do monitor these transactions when deposits happen. Now, even tellers, those who are receiving the deposits, they are also the first line of defense. They must also ask, sometimes if people they are going and depositing cash over the cash deposit machines, that's where the transaction flow goes to compliance, and they also monitor the transactions through the transaction monitoring systems. Now let's understand further what is human trafficking and human smuggling in our next slide. Alright, so before we get into financial indicators, we need to be clear on one distinction, that the CAMS exam tests directly the difference between human trafficking and human smuggling. They sound similar, but they are not the same. Let's look into it one by one. First one, human trafficking, is the exploitation of a person through force, fraud, coercion, for labor, sexual exploitation, or other illegal activities. 3 things to understand first. It can involve both domestic citizens and foreign nationals. No border crossing is required in that. A person can be trafficked within their own country as well. Second, victims do not genuinely consent. Any consent obtained through deception, force, or coercion is not valid. Okay. Third, it is a continuous business model. The traffickers profits from the ongoing exploitation of the victims, not just a one-time transaction. Second, now human smuggling. Human smuggling is a way of transportation of a person across a border illegally for definitely financial gains. There are three things or key differences. First one, it can only involve foreign nationals. A border crossing, it can happen. I would say foreign nationals, you may, not only the case, but also sometimes some mishap happen. Let's say a person who is in country A and he's being threatened, and he's maybe on a exit control list or something, and he opt for this way. So I would say not only find foreign nationals, you may object on that. So that's why I'm just giving you this also as an example, that not only the foreign nationals, it could be this scenario as well. So the cross border crossing is the defining element here. Geography is the key here. Okay. Second, the smuggled person usually agrees to be smuggled. They are paying for this service. Third, it is typically a one-time transaction. The smuggler is paid to move the person, and the relationship usually ends here. Okay. What's the connection? Here is the important link, I would say, between the two. Victims of smuggling can become victims of trafficking. Okay, let's say someone who pays a smuggler to cross a border may arrive to find that their debt has made them a trafficking victim, forced to work to pay off the cost of the journey. Okay, but reverse is not always true. So not all trafficked victims have been smuggled. Many are exploited in their home countries as well, without ever crossing a border. So from the exam perspective, remember that trafficking is equals to, in a way, exploitation, domestic or foreign nationals. Okay, ongoing, and it's continuous thing. Smuggling, on the other hand, it's a transportation of someone, where foreign or even any of the national of a country, if they wish to go to another country, and border crossing is required. Now let's look into that how trafficking happens and how the proceeds enter into the financial system. So now let's look at how trafficking proceeds enter the financial system. This is the core of what compliance professionals need to understand. The cash generated by trafficking, whether from forced labor, sexual exploitation, or other activities, must be laundered. The study guide identifies 5 primary methods. Let's go one by one. The first one is the funnel accounts. This is the most common method, I would say. Multiple individuals, often the victims themselves, okay, make small cash deposits into different accounts. The funds are then consolidated and wired to a trafficker. Like the nail salon example I described at the start is a classic funnel account structure. Many small deposits, rapid consolidation, movement then to a different account or a location. Second one is the cash intensive businesses. Any business that generates a lot of cash. Okay, even though economies are getting digital, people, they are using debit cards, but there are some businesses that are cash intensive, such as the nail salon, massage parlors, car washes, restaurants. Okay, these businesses generate real cash revenues, which generally makes it easy to mix criminal proceeds with legitimate income. Then criminals, they disappear the cash easily into a business revenue, and both come out as if like a clean money, because they go and deposit those funds into the bank accounts. Okay, like the front company, as I mentioned, the nail salon. Next, shell company. Proceeds are moved through companies with no real business activity. Payments, in a way, made connected between shell entities, and it just create a paper trail that excuse me, that looks like a commercial transaction but has no legitimate purpose. So multiple companies across different cities or countries layer the funds and obscure the trail ultimately. The other thing, then we have trade-based money laundering. So what happens here is that trafficking proceeds are disguised as a payment for goods or services. False invoices between related entities create the appearance of legitimate business activity. Yet the invoice says consulting services, but no service were ever rendered. Okay, we will leads to this topic, trade-based money laundering, where we will discuss every single important concept like false invoicing, double invoicing, phantom shipping, and all. We'll discuss later in our next topics once we reach to the trade-based money laundering concepts. Fifth is reinvestment in criminal enterprises, where laundered funds are fed back then into the trafficking operations. Purchasing vehicles for transportation victims, paying for housing where victims are held, utility bills. Okay, so acquiring false identity documents, then every element of the logistic chain cost money. Okay, and that money actually comes from the proceeds of exploitation. Now in the next slide, let's look at the two things as the red flags. What we have primary and secondary indicators. So there are two important red flags that we need to look. So the CAMS study guide divides into indicators, primary and secondary indicators. Okay, let's look at it one by one. So primary indicators, these are transactional, so proceeds from unknown sources that are initially fragmented across multiple accounts or individuals. This is the funnel account signature, many small pieces that only makes sense when you see them in a pattern. Okay, funnel accounts receiving many small deposits from multiple people with funds consolidation at the end, and then moved quickly to another accounts or location. Cash intensive businesses, okay, with revenue significantly above the industry average. The nail salon that we discussed is generating 3 times the revenue of comparable businesses in the same vicinity. It is one of the signal, okay, that not all of that cash is coming from the nail services that they are providing. Then shell companies are receiving payments with no apparent commercial purpose, payment going to entities with no real business activity, no employees, no genuine operations. Then we have trade-based laundering schemes, where invoices for goods or services that cannot be evidenced or verified. Next, we have secondary indicators, which is where victims and behaviors are discussed. Okay, so workers living on business premises with restricted movements, no freedom to leave independently. I remember I wanted to tell you once one of the videos that I was watching from one of the Asian countries, a guy who paid for the visa, and he was told that he will get a job in Cambodia. And by the time he reached over there, and they handed over to some Chinese people, and where they put him into a compound, and they were running scams over there, call center scams, and from there they were calling different people, getting OTP and all this. So this guy was also trafficked to another country. And they said, like, he was telling that in front of them one guy was trying to escape, and they killed him in front of the other people. So you see this human trafficking, then ultimately they are earning lots of money by frauds and different things. So it's not only ultimately normal fraud. We as in compliance, we need to also protect our financial system. So that's our duty as well. So either compliance or those who are in the first line of defense, whenever somebody deposit cash, always ask question if it is beyond their KYC things, or if the nail salon example that we saw, that if that particular activity doesn't fit, like they are bringing, let's say 500,000 cash, or in a day they are bringing 20,000 even a cash, depending on the place where you are, you need to question how can this type of business generate this much revenue. So always cross question. Okay, so next thing, wages not deposited into workers' personal bank accounts, so controlled and withheld by a third party. Multiple individuals sharing a single address or bank account, indicating controlled living arrangements. Payments made to third parties on behalf of workers for rent, transportation, and food, all paid by the employer rather than the worker. Okay, withheld or false identity documents like passport and identification documents held by the trafficker, not by the victims. Okay, And the study guide in specific on this point, detecting these crimes requires gathering multiple indicators from different sources. So there's no single, I would say, indicator proves trafficking. So the pattern is what actually matters here. Let's look into now the next for the TCO. Okay, so here's something the CAMS exam test that many candidates probably miss, I would say. So human trafficking rarely operates in isolation. It is almost always part of a broader transactional crime organization. So what is a TCO? So a TCO is a criminal network that operates across borders, run multiple criminal enterprises simultaneously, like a multinational, I would say, and uses sophisticated money laundering techniques to protect all of its proceeds. Okay, let's look at now how it is happening, what is happening here. So TCO actually running trafficking operations are almost always involved in other crime or criminal activities at the same time, like drug trafficking, arms trafficking, corruption. The fees paid from smuggling and trafficking actually fuel other TCO schemes. The revenue stream, which is cross-finance each other actually. A single TCO network can be trafficking victims, moving drugs, and laundering all proceeds through the same financial infrastructure. Then, trafficking and smuggling enterprises, require, of course, significant infrastructure, such as, housing, vehicles, false identification documents, and border access. TCOs often, work with other criminal organizations to assist them with victim transportation or laundering of associate proceeds. The logistics of these billion-dollar industries require the same financial system access that all business needs. Okay. Then some terrorist groups have diversified into human trafficking and smuggling of cultural artifacts as well. Why? To fund these operations. Trafficking is both a standalone crime and a revenue source for other crime or criminal enterprises. This is the exact link study guide tells us, okay, and it tests us also on that. So candidates must understand these cross-crime connections as well. Okay. The next is detecting these broader network. Okay. So identifying trafficking indicators in a financial institutions may reveal connections to a much larger criminal network. The same shell company and funnel accounts used for trafficking proceeds may also handle drug money or sanction evasion. So always follow the money trail in a trafficking case can dismantle entire TCO. In our next slide, we're going to see a question and then we'll understand which options are right or wrong. All right, so let's look at the question. So which two methods have terrorist groups used to diversify their revenue stream and fund their operations? You have two choices out of this. So option A, human trafficking. Option B, engaging in civil conflict. Option C, smuggling cultural artifacts. Option D, engaging in wire transfer activity. You can think of it. In the next slide, I'll reveal the answer. You may pause your video here, or you can come back to the comments and just put your comments as well. If you need any further clarification, you can drop your comments and I'll see and I'll revert back to that as well. Let's look at now the answer. All right, so option A and option C are the right answers. Let's now explain into our next slide why A and C is correct. Okay. So why A is correct? So the question is actually explains that in a way. Terrorist groups have documented histories of using human trafficking as a direct revenue source, like ISIS is the most documented example. Exploited enslaved populations and using the proceeds to fund operations. Then human trafficking in a way generates ongoing income from the exploitation of victims. It is both a crime and a financial mechanism. That's why A is correct. Option C is also correct, which is telling us smuggling cultural artifacts. So the looting and the sale of cultural artifacts from conflict zones has been a significant revenue source for terrorist organizations. ISIS systematically looted ancient sites in Syria and Iraq, selling artifacts on then the black market to generate funds. This is documented in UN Security Council resolutions as well, and multiple financial intelligence reports. So C is correct. Now let's look at B and D, why they are wrong. Option B is wrong because engaging in a civil conflict is what terrorist groups do. It is their primary activity, but it is not a revenue stream. Civil conflicts cost money. It does not generate. So look at the keywords. Okay, military operations, weapons, logistics, all require funding. So B describes the activity that needs to be funded, not the method of funding. Option D, I would say, is a trap. Wire transfers activity is the movement mechanism. It moves money from one country to another, but it does not generate an income. Terrorist group absolutely use wire transfer to move funds, but the transfer itself is not a revenue stream. D confuses a financial tool with a source of income. This is carefully constructed distractor that catches candidates who are thinking about financial methods generally rather than reading the question precisely. The exam questions are designed in a psychometric way, and you have to be very careful when you're reading simple terminologies. So sometimes some words are defined in a way that distracts you, but you need to sometimes, if you find a question like this, you need to be very careful. Maybe sometimes you need to read twice. Okay, so what you need to remember from the exam perspective, it's a revenue stream that generates income. Civil conflict costs money, it just doesn't generate. So wire transfers move money. Human trafficking and artifacts smuggling generates income. Okay, let's now look at, for us generally overall, what we need to remember from the exam perspective. So before we wrap up, 4 things to take away from this video. First, know the distinction between trafficking and smuggling. Trafficking is actually exploitation, domestic or foreign. Okay, ongoing profits are there, no valid consent is there. On the other hand, smuggling is a transportation of foreign or domestic nationals. Okay, border crossing is required typically here, and it's a one-time kind of an activity or a transaction. Smuggling victims can become trafficking victims. Okay. Second, know how proceeds are laundered, such as through funnel accounts, cash-intensive businesses, shell companies, trade-based money laundering, and reinvestment in the criminal enterprises. These are 5 key methods from the study guide. Third, no single indicator proves trafficking. Detecting it requires multiple indicators from different sources, transactional data, and victim behavior patterns together. Fourth, trafficking connects to the broader criminal ecosystem. TCOs that run trafficking alongside other enterprises. Terrorist groups use trafficking and cultural artifacts smuggling as revenue streams, not just criminal activities. That is actually exam distinctions: revenue generation versus the activity. Right. So we are done with the human trafficking and financial crime. Our next video will be on environmental crime and money laundering. In this, we will cover how wildlife trafficking and illegal waste and disposal and other environmental crimes generate criminal proceeds, and how we need to read this topic, what questions we may face. I'll definitely, as always, I'll put a question also for you. So what we as in compliance professionals are expected to know. So all these topics I'll try to summarize in that. If you haven't subscribed, I would request if you could kindly subscribe, and in order for you to be aware of the next topics, and slowly, gradually, I'm building it up for other content as well. CFE will also come, CGSS will also come, and I have also now the plan to, putting CAMS questions on similar, shorts, so you can also get those questions also you can, and I will also explain over there that how we're gonna break up these questions, how we read those questions. I'll try my level best to come up with these shorts as well soon. Once again, thank you so much for your time, and see you in the next video.